We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. I am live at the Mass Torts Conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. And one of the, I've interviewed an array of attorneys over the past really decade at this event. We have a lot of attorneys who are bringing mass torts, obviously, against corporate malfeasance. And a lot of these attorneys are also civil rights attorneys. In the past, I've actually interviewed Fred Gray here, who was Rosa Parks' first attorney, of course. And joining me now, Brian Barr and Ben Crump, two attorneys who are working on the case of Roger Fortson, who was a U.S. Airman killed by a Florida sheriff. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Sam.
If you guys could just lean into that a little bit there. Let's Ben, why don't we just start with you? Just give us the broad strokes of this case and where we're at.
Certainly. Roger Fortson was a senior U.S. Airman who was an extraordinary young man. I mean, he came from a disadvantaged community, and he went to the military, the Air Force, to help his mother and his two younger siblings be able to improve their lot in life, to be able to have a better chance at achieving the American dream. And as I turn my great co-counsel attorney, Brian Barr, I mean, he was doing everything right. I mean, he was very focused, very committed, law-abiding, and one day, and I still can't believe it, all he did was open his door. There was a police officer who got called about a disturbance in his apartment complex. And we believe adamantly that they were at the wrong apartment. This young black military officer opened the door. He was a law-abiding citizen. He was on the video chat with his girlfriend with the earplugs. So we don't believe he really knew who was there. And so he got his gun that he was registered to own in the state of Florida. And you know, we believe in the state of Florida in the Second Amendment, like it's the second commandment.
Right.
Everybody got guns. But he, unlike most, was trained by the military. He was very disciplined. He was very trained to handle weapons, and he kept his gun when he opened the door down by his side. The officer yelled the command, and before Roger could even comply, bam, 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 bam. Shot 6 shots, 2 of them hitting Roger, and he laid there dying, still trying to follow the officer's commands, because that was the kind of person he was. He was somebody who was respectful to law enforcement, and he followed commands because he learned that in the military. And when he was saying, drop the weapon after he had already shot him, Roger, some of his last words was, I already did. He still tried to comply with everything. And it's so very tragic because he was the light for his family, for his community.
Brian, what kind of what are the legal issues? Like what is the stand? I mean, you know, as Ben Crump just, you know, laid it out, like as a layperson, this seems like a fairly obvious miscarriage of justice. I mean, to say the least. What needs to happen in the context of from a legal standpoint?
Well, I mean, there's obviously going to be a lawsuit. We're in the process of doing the claims. You have to do an administrative process first in Florida before you can file the lawsuit. We're in the process of that. But the defense is going to be it was a reasonable use of force. That's what the officer is going to try and say. But I think it's pretty obvious by just how this whole thing is played out that there's no chance with that defense. I mean, he's been fired. The investigative report has come out that is the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department found it was unreasonable use of force. He's now been charged.
So he's had a criminal. There's two tracks, right? There's the civil track and the criminal track.
He has been and the state attorney decided the evidence was so strong she didn't even need a grand jury. She charged him herself, and without a grand jury, which is very uncommon in Florida. So the evidence is strong, and I don't know if you've seen the tape, but it is just I'll never forget the first time I saw it.
There's no latent, there's no lag time.
No, we didn't know what we were going to see. And I remember Ben called me in to help. We go to this press conference, and we hadn't seen the body cam footage at that point in time. We had heard from a couple of people that had heard things, and we thought we knew what had happened. We show up, we go to the sheriff's department. He says, I want to show you all the tape. We sit down and we watch the tape, and it was one of the most impactful things I have ever seen. I mean, to see this family who lost their brother, their son, the way this kid was lost, and they just saw it. I mean, you hate to use words like executed, but that's what it looked like. I mean, the officer bangs on the door. He's on a face check. I don't know if he could hear him or not, but he bangs on the door, identifies himself. I mean, you hear that on the video. Sheriff's department opened the door. This is the middle of the day. He didn't know who it was. The sheriff is he's standing on the side of the door. So even if you look through the people, you wouldn't have been able to see him. Roger, on the third time, probably terrified. He's got this person banging on his door. He doesn't know what's going on. He has no reason for a cop to be at his door at that point in time. Opens the door, and I don't think the officer even had time to recognize he had a gun. But he had the gun pointed down. It was no threat. You're allowed to answer your door with a gun in Florida, whether it's a sheriff's. I'm not saying it's a good idea,
right?
But you're allowed to do it. There was nothing illegal about what he was doing. And he doesn't even say drop the weapon before he shoots it. Shoots him 6 times. He hits the ground, and then he says drop the weapon. And Roger says, I already did. Yep. I mean, and it happened. I don't see how you could even process he had a gun. And so I believe he just saw a young black man.
Yep.
And the officer got scared and shot him. And I've been telling you, it's that whole video just tells such a vivid story. There's supposed to be this big disturbance going on in that apartment. You hear birds chirping as he's standing there at the door. There's no disturbance going on there. And it's just, the whole thing makes no sense.
So Ben, tell us, like, what is obviously, like, whose liability? I mean, who is liable here? Because it's one thing to say, okay, this sheriff trigger happy, or this deputy, and he had some type of bias that was associated with this. I mean, it's, and you certainly, with the people that you have represented in the past, George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. I mean, the idea of this bias existing, that the calculus of black person adding gun or not gun immediately increases your chances of getting shot without like any hesitation. But who's liable here? Is it just the deputy, or is there a department that is failing to train people or to screen people or to do whatever they can to make sure that they can provide, the serve and protect services?
Yeah. Well, Sam, one of the things I implore all your audience to do is to go online and look at that video. It is riveting. I mean, his verbal command to him is get back or stand back. And Roger's compliant even with that. But he starts shooting instantaneously. And to answer your question directly, what Brian and Natalie and our legal team have acknowledged is that we do believe the Okaloosa Sheriff's Department is culpable. But we also believe that the apartment complex and their management company is responsible as well, because we believe that they directed the sheriff's deputy to the wrong apartment. Roger has never had an arrest, no criminal conviction. I mean, he's a law-abiding citizen. But after we did our research, What we did find was that there was a neighbor of his that had 5 domestic violence calls to his apartment unit. We believe they went to the wrong apartment at the direction of the apartment complex manager. And we believe the proximate cause is really goes back to them being wrong. And then obviously, I do too many of these cases, and it's always the question. It's undeniable. You can't get away from it. You ask yourself, if he was a white officer, would the deputy have shot?
Yeah.
A white officer in the military. Yeah. Yeah. And Brian, let me ask you this: like, what's the hope in terms of? I mean, obviously, for the family, nothing's going to make up for this death of Roger Fortson. But from a societal perspective, from a broader perspective, like how much of that is on your agenda in terms of like trying to change the way all of this happens? Like
that is the agenda. I mean, because like you said, I mean, there's no amount of money that you could pay Roger's mother that she would accept, and she wants him back. I mean, that's what she wants, but she understands that's not realistic. What she wants is to be another person that stands in the gate and says, no more, no more. And we have got to change the way we police in this country, the way we train officers in this country. It's a hard job. And I don't think any of us sitting here would say that being an officer is an easy job. It's clearly a hard job, but they've got to do a better job training these people. They've got to do a better job identifying people who are more likely to shoot. And this department in particular has had multiple issues like this. This isn't the only one. I mean, there was a shooting a year prior to this. Thankfully, they didn't hit the guy, but there was a man they had arrested. He was in the back seat of the car. An acorn fell and hit the car.
Oh, I saw this.
And the
I saw
cop
that. And the cop
unloaded into the car.
Yeah, and he started to do like a tactical roll, and
That's what's going on at this sheriff's department, which tells you they are not training correctly.
Do you think, I'm curious, I mean, aside from obviously training and some type of vetting process that's a little bit more, do you think also, where are both of you, either one of you have thoughts on the scope of what we ask of police officers to do? The idea that was promulgated, during the Black Lives Matters protest, the idea of essentially redistributing some of the responsibilities and some of the funding from the police department to other social services, people who are not, it's one thing to say you need to, it's a lot to ask of an individual to be both a, someone who's going to be fighting crime, but also involved in social services, also involved in all these other things. And, some people would argue these are two different, you're trying to train people to do two different things that are not necessarily diametrically opposed, but work against each other on some level. If there is a complaint of domestic violence, maybe the lead person there should be, instead of two police officers, maybe one of the persons is a social service person, and they're accompanied by police backup.
Yeah, and why don't I take this from Brian? I've testified before at the U.S. Congress and the Senate on these issues about these departments of public safety being able to have resources, not just for police officers who oftentimes are called to deal with criminal matters. Their mentality is to make you comply, and if you don't comply, to use necessary force, even up into deadly force. Well, how about on a domestic violence call or a mental health call in particular, which they get called a lot, instead of having a law enforcement officer trying to de-escalate a situation with a person who is having this mental health crisis, you have a mental health counselor who's there either taking lead or working in concert with the law enforcement social work issues. I mean, many times, unfortunately, you have domestic violence situations or you have altercations between people that don't need somebody to put a gun in their face. What they need somebody to do is to say, let's talk about this. And officers aren't trained to do that kind of stuff. But if we use just not even a large portion, probably a small percentage of it, to say when we have these 911 calls, let's have a social worker go with the officers. I mean, how hard is that to act? Somebody who has diplomatic negotiation skills.
It also feels like we don't need armed people to issue tickets for running a red light or for having I mean, in New York City, we have and everywhere you have people going around issuing tickets.
Don't get me started.
Well,
man,
I mean,
because the reality is this here. The majority of black people and brown people who are killed by the police in America starts with traffic stops. And the majority of them are unarmed, but yet they end up dead. And so I don't know. I've said this, Brian. I don't know if you thought some interview. I mean, they shoot so many black men running away from them in the back. It's almost like a cliche. And it seems to me that one of the most dangerous things in America to police officers are black men running away from you.
Right.
I mean, how are you a threat when I'm trying to get away from you? But yet they do it and then they justify it. And you don't see them. I wrote a book in it, chapter 2, open season, and it's titled, "The Police Don't Shoot White Men in the Back," because it's so rare. If ever they shoot a white man in the back running away, they ain't gonna do it because they know there will be circumstances and consequences. But with minorities, not so much.
And again, to me, it goes back. We've got to change the way we police in this country. I mean, do we need police departments to have tanks? I mean, you see them roll down the streets in these armored vehicles, and they're carrying. It's like, why take some of that funding and put it into the social services side where we know it's desperately needed? I mean, why are we doing things like no-knock warrants? You know, the Breonna Taylor thing. Why? I mean, hell, if somebody kicked my door in at night, I don't know who it is. You know, got a gun at my bedside, I'm probably going to grab it. Now,
Right.
I have a better chance of surviving that situation because I'm a white guy, but that is a reasonable reaction. Somebody kicks your door in that late. Now, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. And that's the way we police. We've got to change our mindset on how we're doing it, or we're just going to keep killing people.
Well, Brian Barr, Ben Crump, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. We'll be following this case, and thank you for your time. I don't know if there's anything else you want to just
Want to
close
say
with.
thank you, Sam, for covering this important case because Roger Fortson deserves to be alive today.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.